All right, this week we start working with assemblies, and you've got a couple of projects you're going to work on. You're going to assemble the parts into an assembly, is what we call it. And in doing so, we constrain the parts together. Um, and in performing these constraints, unless you need a part to move, okay, for whatever reason within your assembly, it should be totally constrained and locked down. And an example of that you'll see later in the course is where you want to be able to show movement within the part. And there's certain ways that you constrain those so that they can only move within those limits. Other than that, everything should be locked down in place because you don't want something changing in your assembly. So for an example, if you put a bolt in and you've got it constrained so that it's inserted correctly, but you do not constrain so that it cannot rotate, then you make your drawing, and if you come back to the assembly and for some reason that bolt gets rotated, the next time you open your drawing, you've got an error message, and it readjusts that bolt to a new orientation, and that may be something you do not want. So I teach, unless you have specific motion that you want in your assembly, everything should be locked down so it does not move at all. Now, back there was a video on Inventor options and setup. And in that, you were to make some changes to the program options that will affect assemblies. And I hope you did that back at the beginning, because it affects what we're going to be doing today. All right, so I'm providing you with a zipped project file in Blackboard. You'll need to download that and extract it to your computer. And then you'll set that as your active project. And so after you've downloaded and extracted it, you'll open Inventor and you'll come here and go to settings, and you're going to want to browse to wherever you extracted it to. Okay, and then you choose this project here. It may say child booster, it may just say booster. I don't know what the one I'm uploading says, but then you'll open that and make it the active project. Okay, so if it doesn't automatically check to it, then you highlight it and hit apply. That makes it your active project. So it will only open up files that are within that project folder, and then when you save things, it will save it back to that project folder. Okay, so now we want to start a new and you can just use the English US. We want to start a new assembly right here. And here's our assembly environment that we're working in. In the browser tree, you've got, various things. Mainly one that we want is the origin. Okay. Looking across the top here, you've got assemble, which we will use to place objects and constrain objects. The design is a little bit more, it's more advanced than what we're going to be doing in this class. So when we get into the 11-13 class, we'll use some of these things. 3D modeling is where you can actually do modeling within the assembly. Okay, like say you need to put a hole through a part that aligns certain parts together for like a tapered pin or a drive pin. And you don't know where it goes on the part until you've assembled the model. Here's where you would do that. You would do a sketch and then a hole or something along those lines. Okay, on the Annotate tab, here's where you can put dimensions and notes in the actual model. And we'll cover some of this in the I think the 1107 class. definitely, yeah, definitely later on in your classes here. But this is the easiest way to measure something in your assembly if you need to measure it, is with this dimension tool. There is a measure tool here under the Tools tab, and it's a little difficult to use sometimes. It just doesn't seem to want to work right, you know. These other things are a lot more advanced. You're free to look at them if you want to. Um, I'm just not going to cover them in this class, okay? All right, so to start with, we place, on the place, we have a couple of options here. We can place a part that we've created, or we can place from the Content Center, which is a catalog of bolts and nuts and fasteners and things. We're really not going to deal with these in this class, but you can bring in imported CAD files, like an AutoCAD file, and work from there. So we're just going to stick with place, and it opens up to my child booster folder, okay? And then when you click on one of the parts, it gives you a highlight of what it looks like. Now, the first part that you place in an assembly is what establishes the origin and the XYZ coordinate system for the assembly. So the first one that you place in, you need to bear that in mind when you select the part you're going to move in here, okay? So in this case, part number 5, the top, I want to use that as my first part going in here. So I'll go open, and then it pops to the middle, and you can drag your mouse out, and if you need more than one copy of that part in your assembly, you can click again and again and again and again. Once you get the number of parts you want, you just right click and go OK. Now, if I look at my planes, you can see they're based on the first part I put in. And you look right here in the browser, it says it has a little pin on it right there. That means it's fully constrained. That was the option that we made, so that first part on placement gets pinned or locked in place. And what this means is if you do not do that, your coordinate system will stay this way, and if you rotate this based on constraints, then when you go to front view, you're not getting front view anymore because you've moved the part around. Okay, so now let's place the end pieces for this. Part number 1. And so I'm going to place 2 of them in here and go OK. Now that if you look at you can move these parts around. You can't move the one because it's pinned, but these you can move around. If you need to rotate them for whatever, and here it's called free rotate. Okay, and so you can select an object and then you can rotate it, and it just kind of frees it up. It's no longer constrained to the XYZ plane or orientation, and so it's just a free rotate. And sometimes you want to do this so that you can move these things around a little bit. All right, now then, we're going to insert these into the slots, and we're going to use constraints to do that. Now, up here, we've got 2 options, joint and constraint. In this class, I want us to use constraints because I want you to have a really good understanding of how constraints work. Joints combine a number of constraints together in one operation. But I want you to have a good understanding of constraints. So we're going to go with constraints here. The options we have, and we're going to stick with the assembly tab here, is we've got mate, and within the mate option, we've got face-to-face mate or flush mate, okay? And then we've got angle, which you can place things at angles. We've got tangent, we've got insert, and then we've got symmetry. And I'll be honest with you, I've never used the symmetry constraint. I'm not saying that it's not, usable. It's just I've never used it before. Okay, I've never had a need or a reason to. So let's go with our mate. Okay, and we'll go face-to-face mate. And what we want to do, and to rotate these things, I'm using a 3D mouse a lot of times. If you, let's see, hold down your shift key and then press the wheel of your mouse, you can get the orbit. Okay, it's a little easier than coming over here and grabbing the wheel or moving that. Okay, so you have selections here. 1 and 2, you notice the color blue and the color green. And so you've picked the surfaces that you want to mate together. And so I'm going to pick that top surface of the slot right there. And then I want to pick the top surface of the leg here. And you get a nice, doink when it snaps into place. And I'm going to hit OK. But you see, all it did, I didn't. Okay, so you can see it's constrained it so I cannot move it vertically, but I can move it side to side and back and forth because it's mated that surface with this surface. Okay, so now to get it actually in the slot, we'll keep the same thing with a face-to-face mate, and I'm going to go this surface to the edge right there, and I'm going to apply that. Okay, now I'm going to do a flush mate with the outside edges, and I'm going to go OK for that. Okay, and so that's got it assembled, and you can't drag it and move it because it's constrained in 3 different directions so that it's there. The other end, we'll do that the same way, but while we're here, depending upon your part, okay, and I think our, yeah, we've got one, look at my notes here. Yeah, we've got one that we can use surface planes on, so we'll do that in a minute. So let's go ahead and insert this other one. And I'm not going to talk my way through it. I'm just going to and you don't have to exit out of the command. You can keep it active as you're going by just hitting the apply button. Okay, now we can do an offset, and I'll do an offset just to demonstrate here. So normally we would go flush here and flush here, but we can give it an offset. And depending upon, are you doing face-to-face or are you doing flush, the offset distance, may be different. So I'm going to say OK. And so I've put an offset in there. Now that's not the way we want it constrained, but I put that in. And so let's come over here and look in our browser. If we expand part number 5, we can see all of the constraints here. Okay, and if you mouse over them, it will highlight in your model what they are. And remember those green and blue colors? That's the surfaces that we chose. Okay, And so when you do an offset or an angle or something like that, it tells you what the offset is, and you can edit it here. Okay, and then it adjusts it in your model. So I'm going to make it 0 just to clean that up. And then it took out the 0. If we had a 0, it just took that out. Okay, now there's another thing you can do here up here in relationships. You can hit show constraints and you pick a part, and it will show constraints that are assigned to that part. Okay, and then you can go hide all. Okay, so that's a little bit of that kind of stuff. All right, so let's bring in I don't know what part it is. My drawing doesn't have the part numbers. Let's see. Yeah, part number 2. Let's bring in part number 2 and place it. Okay, now then, I'm gonna come over here, part number 2, and I'm gonna expand the origin, and I want to see what the planes are. There's that one. That's the one I want right there, the XZ plane. So I'm gonna make it visible. And I'm gonna come to my origin, and I'm gonna make the XY plane visible. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to constrain these two planes together, because when I created these parts, I was thinking ahead on how I wanted the thing aligned up. And you can use, a lot of times it's easier to constrain the XY planes, the XYZ planes together, or you can constrain a plane to a part. So that's the kind of thing you want to think about when you're creating parts, is how are you going to constrain them in the model later. Okay, so I'm going to go constrain. We'll go face to face. I'm going to choose that surface plane and this surface plane. And I'm just going to OK it to get out of that. And now you can see it put it in the center of the part. Okay. All right, so I'm going to hide these two planes now because I don't need to see them anymore. And we need to get this thing inside, so I'm going to go with a face-to-face there, and a face-to-face there, and apply that. And let's see, the bottom of this should be 2 inches up. So we're going to go with a face-to-face. I'm going to choose the bottom. That's kind of hard to see. Let me flip that up. And this bottom, but I want a 2-inch offset. Okay, and I'll go okay with that. All right. Okay, so there's a couple of other parts in here. Yeah, I'm going to pull one in and to demonstrate angle. Let's see, which one is it? Part number 4. And there's actually 2 of them that go in here, but I'm going to bring in one, and I want to demonstrate the angle constraint with it. Okay, and so let's go constraint and let's go angles. And you got 3 different options here. This is the most simple that you'll use most of the time. The directed angle or the undirected angle is when you're going to have a part that's going to have movement in it, and it can move, say, from 0 degrees to 90 degrees. And so that's the undirected angle. We're going to go with the directed so that it stays at the angle that we want it to stay. Now I'm going to choose this surface plane, and I'm going to come around and choose the back of this surface, And you notice it kind of flipped it over. And I'm going to make that, let's make it 45 degrees. Now you see how that moved it down. That's not what I want, so I'm going to change it to 135. That's what I want. So I'm going to say OK. Now what it did is let me just hit the left cube there. It put it at a 145-degree angle to this surface here. And if I wanted to, that's not how this thing's going to be assembled, but if I wanted it to be together, what I would constrain now is this edge, and I could go with this surface, or I could go with, we'll go with that surface. Just so it did the surface, but I can still move it, up and down, but it's going to stay clicked onto that surface. Oh, no, it didn't either. What happened? Oh, I don't understand. I didn't like that one anyway, so I'm going to delete it. And we'll go back again. So we'll go with constrain, do the mate. I'm going to choose that edge. And I'm going to come up here and choose the top edge of that. I don't know why all those changed. Okay. And so now it's got it on there, and I would give an end constraint so that it doesn't, slide away. But that's not how this thing gets assembled anyway. So I'm going to delete both of those. And we'll just go ahead and put the right thing on it. And we'll go with a flush here, flush there, flush here, and a flush there. Okay. And so let's get that part put in. And that's how an angle constraint works. Now I want to bring in another part that's called peg. And I'm going to place it up here. And we're going to use the insert constraint now. So we'll go constraint, and we're going to go, well, let me demonstrate tangent first, okay? And tangent, you got two options, either inside or outside. Okay, so I'm going to go outside, and I'm going to choose the cylinder here, and I'm going to choose the front surface of this. Okay, and so what it did is it made it tangent to that surface. Now I can still move it up and down. I can still move it up and down, back and forth this way and up and down, and it'll rotate. Okay, but it's always going to stay. It's always going to say it's tangent to this surface. Okay, let's take the tangent out, because I want to do the insert to show you how those work. And this is kind of a simplification of it. Don't want joints. Constraint, let's go insert. And in here, you've got two different options also, opposed or aligned. And we'll leave it on opposed to show you how it is. And this is for rounded objects, okay? Like, pegs and bolts and things like that. And so I'm going to choose, if I choose this radius right here, okay, and you notice it picks a surface. So I could do here, or I could go down and pick the bottom surface. The surface you pick is important. All right, so I'm going to pick that one as number 1, and I'm going to come over here in my peg, and I'm going to pick the bottom of it as number 2. And because now we're at opposed, that's the way it's lining up. If I go to aligned, it's just like a flush on the surfaces that you selected. I could do an offset minus 0.5, and it would push it down, 0.5 based on those surfaces. Okay, so let's cancel that and start over with it. Insert, and I want to go with aligned. I'm going to choose the top surface here, and I want to choose this ring right here. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted that one. Okay, and so now that put it down inside the part, much like how it would be inserted anyway. Okay. Trying to think what next. Yeah, we'll say okay. Now the problem is this part it's locked in place because it's inserted a peg into a hole, but it will rotate. And with a round peg like this, that's not a big deal. But if it were a bolt or a nut, which has, edges to it, it would be a big deal in your drawing. So what we want to do is align our axis planes. So we're going to go constraints. I'm going to find one that I like. I'm going to go XY on the peg. And XY there. And go OK. And what it did is it aligned those two planes together. So now this is locked in place and it cannot rotate. Okay. I'm going to stop this video. That's been almost 30 minutes. You can practice, go ahead and practice assembling the rest of this thing. There's another apron that goes on the other side, and there's 2 glue blocks that go, right up in the corners here and the corner over here, up in here. So you can do those things, and I'll come back with the next video here in a minute.